When 2 people threw soup at the Van Gogh sunflowers, that got more press mentions of the word climate than when 1/3 of Pakistan went underwater just a few months earlier.
It's going to be hell, and that's why we do what we do.
The chances are you've heard of Just Stop Oil. The group who turned Stonehenge orange, bring London roads to a standstill and get arrested a lot. Their original goal of stopping new oil, gas and coal licences has now been pledged by Keir Starmer. But that doesn't seem to have slowed them down. In late July, 10 members of the group were charged with conspiring to disrupt Heathrow Airport, following a 5-year prison sentence for another member who blocked the M25. They remain one of Britain's most controversial and well-known pressure groups. But are they actually successful in their aims? I met with 2 Just Stop Oil members, PhD climate scientist Alex de Koning and ex-principal scientist for Shell, Graham Buss, to find out. In terms of Starmer's decision to stop these oil and gas licences, do you feel at least partially responsible for that change?
Yeah, I do. The truth is that before Just Stop Oil came along, no one discussed this issue. It was a non-subject. Now, everybody talks about it all the time.
What does the future look like for Just Stop Oil now that's happened?
Well, that's a win. It's a start, but it's only just the start. Let's not forget that while we're still burning oil and gas, even if the numbers are declining, it's still getting worse. It's not how much we emit per year, it's the cumulative amount of oil and gas pollution that determines how hot the temperature's going to get.
So right now we're focusing on getting the Labour government to sign a fossil fuel treaty, a legally binding treaty that says across the world we are going to end fossil fuels. And as soon as that happens, then we can all go home. And then Just Stop Oil is done and there's no more disruption and I can get back to a regular life. And I'm looking forward to that. I hope it happens soon.
So how are you going to squeeze Starmer into signing this? What are the plans you've got coming up?
So we're targeting airports at the moment. And it's not because we want to cause this disruption, it's because this is a really good international symbol for the carbon economy and how we can tackle it. So the question here is one of causality. Just Stop Oil disrupts an airport, the media reports on it, public opinion on environmental issues might shift. And Just Stop Oil hope that this chain ends with Keir Starmer, a man who has labelled the group's actions arrogant and contemptible, making a policy change. It sounds admittedly far-fetched, but according to Bart Kamartz, Professor of Politics and Communication at LSE, Just Stop Oil's tactics are far from futile.
Well, the very fact that we are talking with each other, that you are here and that the media kind of takes notice and kind of is talking about Just Stop Oil, and not just about Just Stop Oil, but unavoidably also about the issues that Just Stop Oil wants to put on the agenda, is evidence to me that their tactics are working. We do need to make a distinction here between the support for their tactics or the support for the cause. I think it's about more than 80% consider climate change to be a very serious problem that needs to be tackled. And these numbers have been increasing over the years, which is a different thing of kind of saying, oh, I don't like that they're disrupting the motorways. I don't like that they are throwing stuff at paintings. And the media kind of obviously reporting these protest spectacles and thereby also discussing the issues.
When it comes to media attention on Just Stop Oil, the focus is usually their tactics, which do often seem designed to upset people. Spraying Stonehenge orange and chucking soup over Van Gogh's sunflowers come to mind. But as the media attention dies down, these stunts are often revealed to have been less extreme than they initially seemed. The powder lobbed at Stonehenge turned out to be washable corn flour. Van Gogh's sunflowers are covered with protective glass. Oddly, Just Stop Oil seem to actively strive for more excoriatingly bad PR than their actions warrant. But to Alex, the Van Gogh stunt, one that saw Just Stop Oil vilified all over the media, was an enormous success.
Yes, so if we look at Meltwater Statistics, for example, they're a media monitoring company, and they tracked that when 2 people threw soup at the Van Gogh sunflowers, that got more press mentions of the word climate than when 1/3 of Pakistan went underwater just a few months earlier. 33 million people completely lost their homes, their pets likely. Half of them were children. All of their lives just washed away, and yet that got less talk about the climate crisis in the UK than when two people threw soup at a painting, a protected painting.
Of course, sometimes Just Stop Oil's protests do have real effects. Last November, an ambulance was delayed during a Just Stop Oil road blockade, after which the Met Police and Just Stop Oil were both pretty quick to blame one another. So do Just Stop Oil activists feel bad when regular people become the targets of their activism?
When that happens, can you understand a bit of the public resentment, and do you have sort of plans to stop things like that happening at your protests?
We always have a blue light policy. We always take care to let ambulances through, and wherever possible, let public transport through if it's blocking roads, for example. That if there was another way that would work, we would do it. I remember a few years ago people talking about the climate crisis, and they would say, oh, England will be like France, it'll be fabulous. But that's not the future, those little children. It's not going to be like France, it's going to be hell. And that's why we do what we do.
Well, it's a really horrible situation. It really is, and I'm so sorry for anyone that gets caught up in any of this disruption. And sadly, the only thing that has been effective thus far throughout history in creating massive social changes to the level that we need is disruptive action.
So can Just Stop Oil's disruptive activism bring the group closer to achieving its goals, even if their tactics don't win many hearts? After all, a 2023 YouGov poll revealed that just 17% of people had a favourable or very favourable opinion of Just Stop Oil, compared to 64% on the other side. Well, making any concrete conclusions from the limited available data is difficult, but researchers have noticed one very interesting phenomenon. In 2022, Social Change Lab surveyed the British public and found that 87% of respondents were familiar with Just Stop Oil. They also surveyed these people to find out what they thought of a less radical environmental activist group, Friends of the Earth. Around 15 days later, once Just Stop Oil had embarked on a week-long blockade of the M25, the same people were surveyed. And fascinatingly, along with the sudden increase in awareness of Just Stop Oil, which increased to 92%, there was a sudden 2.6% increase in support for Friends of the Earth, equivalent to 1.75 million people in the UK. It seemed that Just Stop Oil's media attention resulted in increased support for a more palatable activist group. And this phenomenon, known as the positive radical flank effect, where radical factions of a movement improve support for more moderate factions, is well documented throughout history.
Radicalism is per definition less liked by the general population, because often general populations are more conservative, more kind of let's not rock the boat too much kind of like. But histories of social change shows us that there's always been kind of more radical push and incremental change. Well, I think a very good example is Malcolm X, obviously, and the kind of more radical element of the black civil rights movements in the United States, who were vilified as well and also put in prison. Social change happens when the political elites feel that they are in a need to compromise in order to preserve the status quo, in order to preserve their interests. And obviously the more radical elements of movements push against the system, whereas then the more reformist one will kind of operate from within the system to kind of seek compromises and change. There is also in the environmental movement a history of Greenpeace, who very much liked Just Stop Oil, also was very aware of the kind of McLuhan message, the medium is the message. And now Greenpeace finds itself much more into the kind of role of the reformist actor, whereas Just Stop Oil is the actor that is now in the role of Greenpeace, of kind of making media spectacles and kind of thereby also animating the debate.
And animate the debate they do. Just Stop Oil's media appearances, especially with right-wing broadcasters, often turn into fairly frenzied spectacles and pull in huge viewing figures.
You have this strange relationship with the media where often Just Stop Oil people, they'll be brought on a show, let's say Piers Morgan, with an audience and a sort of spokesperson that seem to really despise you.
Yeah.
But you consistently get re-invited on. It seems that you guys pull in great numbers for people like Piers Morgan. They really want you on their show. You really drive engagement, even if they hate you. Is it fair to say that that relationship is symbiotic?
Well, I have to say that I personally don't like going on those programs, but I do go on those programs, on those right-wing programs. We're there to change public opinion. The government had made a commitment in the Paris Agreement to inform the public about the climate crisis. And they are not doing it. You would think everything was tickety-boo. So we take every opportunity that we can to tell the public how serious it is. But of course, our ultimate goal is to engage the government in making change. So we'll go on any programme that wants us.
Discussions about Just Stop Oil in the media are often conducted with a sense of indignation about the group's tactics. But ironically, it's precisely this indignation, this media outrage on behalf of the British public, that drives Just Stop Oil's message. After all, various studies have shown that content that evokes anger has the capacity to be hugely viral and thus profitable.
There's a lot of people in the media who are like, oh, well, we can't talk about the climate at the moment, there's no climate news happening. So obviously we would prefer that climate change is in the news instead of Stonehenge and that action. But it is important because even if 1% of the 110 million people who saw that one video go away and research about the climate crisis, or they even hear the words climate crisis, or they even think about the fact that people are resisting it, maybe because the government is not doing enough on the climate crisis, that is already a success. So it is really important to have that wide reach because we live in such an attention economy.
Just Stop Oil have found themselves in an interesting position. The primary aim of their initial campaign has been backed by the new government, and yet one of their members has just received a historic 5-year prison sentence after being labelled a fanatic by the case's judge. A sentence that the UN Special Rapporteur on Environmental Defenders said set a dangerous precedent that should shock the conscience of any member of the public. It's immensely difficult to track the success of Just Stop Oil's campaigning, but they've undoubtedly reached millions with their message, and are now suffering grave legal consequences for their actions. If one thing is clear, it's that Just Stop Oil activists don't seem to care about being liked.
The history of non-violent civil resistance is possibly always that the activists, those people trying to bring about change, they're nearly always unpopular. I mean, look, Martin Luther King, look at the suffragettes.
This isn't the X factor. Public support would be nice, but women didn't get the vote by voting.